AMD's X3D CPUs have been dominant when it comes to gaming, and right now market share for AMD CPUs, especially on new builds, is extremely outpacing Intel builds. But we're now starting to see potentially some of the growing pains and nuances as we move forward with X3D CPUs. I'm referring specifically to Battlefield 6, but not exclusively Battlefield 6. We're talking about all of EA's games. Now that EA has implemented the Javelin Anti Cheat, which is basically using a secure boot and a kernel/hypervisor level of cheat detection when it comes to accessing your CPU, it's now breaking X3D CPU core parking and multi-CCD CPU core parking. So today I'm going to demonstrate that and show you, and kind of maybe give you some information as to why you might want to hold off before you go trying to force affinities and process lassos and all these other things to try and force core parking when it comes to EA's anti-cheat.
Jay likes boats.
USS Fletcher, torpedoes, and agility.
No. He really likes boats.
I'm the Bismarck. I shoot big guns. Oh no!
He really likes boats.
The IJN Yamato, the true fear in the Pacific.
And when he's not playing with his boats, he is building his boats.
Done.
And when he's not building those boats, he's playing with those boats. Online, in World of Warships.
This year marks 250 years of the United States Navy, and World of Warships is celebrating this incredible milestone with one of their biggest events ever, the US Navy 250th Anniversary Celebration. From now through the end of the year, you can build your very own Liberty Harbor, an interactive naval base packed with missions, history, and awesome rewards. Upgrade facilities, send ships on expeditions, and earn naval-based supplies to unlock epic prizes, including the brand new Tier 8 Premium Cruiser Bridgeport. Free by just playing. New to the game? We'll use invite code STEPUP250 when you sign up on PC to instantly get 20 days of premium account time, the US Tier 3 Cruiser St. Louis, a port slot, and a commander. Plus access to missions that can score you the US Tier 7 Cruiser Boise, 7 super containers, and 40 million credits and more. And for returning players, rejoin the fight and claim special rewards available only during this event. Tackle Liberty Harbor missions to collect valuable items and dive back in with fresh ships and content. So whether you're a new recruit or a seasoned commander, set sail today to celebrate 250 years of naval power in World of Warships.
Join the fight and build your legacy at worldofwarships.com.
So yeah, he really likes boats.
Yeah.
It's kind of funny that this is happening now. I feel like we've finally reached a period where the Windows task scheduler and games and chipsets and stuff now are pretty automatic at being good at core parking on certain games, and then not having to go through the craziness of like cores aren't parking. Now it's working fine, and then it's broken again when it comes to these very kernel/hypervisor level anti-cheats. Now it's working great in the sense of it's stopping cheating. Like BF6 right now, if you haven't been paying any attention to the subreddits or any of the group pages or group forums when it comes to Battlefield, the amount of complaining and whining about them getting banned for using paid cheats is glorious. The amount of people that are just so pissed off that they can't cheat now. It's like, thank God, this is something we've needed for a long time. Unfortunately, it just opens the door to the very controversial discussion about third-party apps having access at hypervisor level data on your CPU. So that's a whole nother discussion for another day. But what has started happening now is, obviously for X3D CPUs and any multi-CCD CPU on AMD now, to get the most benefit for what you've paid for, you need to disable the clock CCD, which is the higher clock CCD, in favor of running your game entirely on the cache CCD. Now the CPU I have installed in here right now is a 7950X3D. It's a 96 megabyte L3 cache, which is huge. That is why you see such a gaming uplift, because it can store so much more information and so many more frames in the CPU, giving it a huge uplift when it comes to gaming performance, even over non-X3D AMD CPUs. And then just absolutely kind of comical at how far ahead it is ahead of like the new Core Ultra CPUs when it comes to Intel. But anyway, I digress. What happens now natively is when you launch a game that Windows now identifies this is a game process and uses Xbox Game Bar to kind of identify what those games are. It says, hey, let's park the other CCD, the CCD with the higher clock speed, and let's only run it on the cache CCD. And any background tasks that need to do anything will just utilize the the parked CCD, so that you're not now having cross latency between CCD game threads being handed off between CCDs, right? So I'm going to demonstrate that right now by using Cyberpunk 2077 and Process Lasso. So this is Process Lasso right here. It's a really neat utility. I keep going to the wrong mouse. Let's go ahead and full screen that. It's a really neat utility. It shows you everything running in your CPU. It shows you the Windows environment. It shows you the impact on your CPU. And you can see here the affinity. The affinity is what threads and what cores is the process allowed to access. You can see right here 0 to 31. It's a 32 thread CPU, but the first thread and the first core is actually core 0. So that's why it stops at 31 in case you're wondering. But you can see right now every process that's running and active processes have access to the entire CPU. Now, as long as you haven't gone into your Windows and set the power profile to high performance or max performance, you want to leave it at balanced, it will hand off game threads to the cache CCD automatically as long as you have the AMD 3D cache optimizer driver installed, which comes with your chipset driver. But here is Cyberpunk 2077. You'll see the process will load up right here. I'll just go to active process. And you can see right here, it says the EXE, it's normal, it's gonna move around on me. It says 0 to 31. But if we look up here, you'll see that when we get into the game, there we go. See those gray, that gray means the non-cache CCD has currently been parked. Now the game technically has access to all 32 threads, as you can see right here. But the driver has done its task and parked that other CCD, which is giving us a huge bump in performance. Now you'll notice some of those threads might go from gray to a very small green bar or potentially a black bar like that, which is probably like 1% utilized. That means that core or that thread is technically awake, but gray means it's parked. Like, there we go. Here's an example of a background task that just happened. But that's normal behavior for core parking. Even though it shows right here, all 32 threads are available to it, the driver and the optimizer is doing its job by making sure that it's not bouncing back and forth between CCDs. That is expected behavior, that is proper behavior of a core parking CPU. There are 4 CPUs as of the making of this video. If you're watching this in the future, there could be more, but there's only 4 CPUs right now. Actually, I take that back. 6 CPUs that currently core park. 7950 X3D, 7900 X3D, 9900 X3D, 9950 X3D, 9900X, and 9950X. Remember, the 9000 series CPUs, even the non-X3D CPUs, have core parking because they've determined that even if you don't have a 3D Vcache CCD, it's still beneficial for cross latency between the CCDs to just park one in games. So, and most games won't need more than 8 cores, 16 threads anyway, so AMD's made that kind of the process and the way it moves going forward. And so if there's a 10 series or whatever they're gonna call it moving forward, you'll see that list grow. But that's expected behavior, even though we're in the menu. Let me show you what's happening with Battlefield right now. So Battlefield, when you launch Battlefield, you'll notice over here that we'll get EA Anti Cheat Game Service Launcher and EA Anti Cheat Installer. So it's kind of interesting. It showed like it's almost like it installed itself every time it launches. It's just kind of weird. I'm not sure if that's the way it actually works, but it said anti-cheat installer going. Pay attention over there. You'll notice nothing is parking. The game is launched. I showed you in Cyberpunk without even going into a game. It had already parked because it's based on the executable. It's not necessarily based on whether or not the game is currently in an active match or an active map. The executable is what determines the CPU's behavior. So we've got Battlefield 6 is launched, and then the 2 EA services are launched. And as you can see right now, it is not core parking. So what does this mean? It means you're technically not getting as much FPS available to you that you may have necessarily paid for because of the fact that it's not behaving in the way that gaming services on 3D Vcache and multi-CCD CPUs from AMD are intended to behave. This is everything to do with the kernel/hypervisor level of the anti-cheat for EA's Javelin. The new Javelin anti-cheat is doing an amazing job at catching cheaters. Nobody has been able to get away with cheating on BF6 more than a match or 2. But this is the trade-off. It's costing you some performance. Now, if this is the only title you play, and you went with the multi-CCD CPU because you're like, I want the most ultimate gaming setup you could possibly have with multitasking and gaming, this is going to affect you. If you're running a 9800X3D or a 7800X3D or any of the single CCD CPUs like a 7700X or a 7800X, like not just regular CPUs, this isn't affecting you because you don't have more than one CCD, which is a cluster of actual physical cores. But this is kind of bothering some people because they're like, wait a minute, why is EA and AMD not working together on this? Well, we don't know that they're not. Let's just throw that out there. We don't know what we don't know. So they could be working on potentially a way for them to have the 3D V-cache and the multi-CCD behavior be the way it's intended to be. But we don't know what the nuances are of having an anti-cheat that operates at a kernel or sub-kernel level. There could be some nuances there that we just simply don't know or understand. Now, by doing some research, I was going to demonstrate how to process lasso and kind of force this into a parked core situation. But there's a couple of things I want to point out here. You have to lasso every single EA process to make that happen. I don't know if you've noticed, like, there's a lot of processes bouncing around right here. And sometimes the EA anti-cheat game service one, like the other one will pop up, or both will be there, or only one will be there. Even if I go in here and I do, let's say Battlefield 6. Now this is the way you would normally do a process lasso. You'd right click, CPU affinity, always select CPU affinity, and then you would just click right here, CCD0, which is the cache, right? So you have a frequency cache, which is the high clock, which is CCD1, and then CCD0 is your high cache clock or core, which is why you would want your games on there. So if you hit OK, you'll notice it says the rule is only use cores and threads 0 through 15, but as you can see here, it is still absolutely using all of them. Now you would have to do this as well for the CPU affinity for the actual anti-cheat, and if we do CCD cache on that as well and hit apply, check it out, we have a rule applied there as well, but it's ignoring our rule and still using the entire CPU. Now there could be some other processes that are not, there's a lot of processes running on the system, right, that are just background. I don't know how many of these are EA related, but you would have to do that for every single one of them. But there's a very important reason why you should not go in and start messing around with the anti-cheat. And I'm gonna put these back before I forget. And what I came across was a document that was basically stating the way the Javelin works and the way that the EA anti-cheat works is if you go in and start messing with the affinity and it's expecting to see certain behaviors and it's now not seeing those behaviors, it could lead to false positives on the Javelin anti-cheat. Now that leads to an instant ban. An instant ban, okay? There's no real reversing that. That is one of the things that's making people so mad, is that they've gotten themselves banned from EA servers, and Battlefield 6 specifically in this instance, and there's no appeal to that, okay? So that means you would technically have to like rebuy the game under a different account if you got it like through Steam or whatever. And it's definitely not worth the false positive of banning yourself from the game servers for maybe 5 or 10% uplift in potential performance. This is where, if you are building a dedicated gaming rig, why the 9800X3D is still the GOAT, because you don't deal with any of this. You don't deal with the multi-CCD stuff. Now I'm using a 9950X3D at home. Obviously it's a water-cooled 5090. If you don't have an FPS counter up, in my instance, I don't. I didn't even add it to my sensor panel like I normally do. I would never notice the FPS difference. The FPS runs so high, it's very unnoticeable. But I would definitely notice if I went to connect to a game and it told me with a big red screen, you've been banned. And it's not even an attempt ban. Those are perm bans when that happens. So it's not worth it. Now, whether or not this will get patched or maybe potentially fixed in the future, we'll see. But this is the first time we've seen an anti-cheat go to this level of the CPU to perform its operations. Now, AMD would have to obviously be very involved in the development to make sure that in the future this isn't a problem. But I have a feeling AMD is involved in this. I think we just don't know their involvement yet. We don't know what the workaround or the fix is. This is probably something that will progress as time goes on. but I don't think it's necessarily something worth getting in a knot about, because the FPS hit, although it could be noticeable on lower end GPUs, I think if most people are running a $450 to $500 CPU like a 9800X3D, they're probably going to have a powerful enough GPU paired with it to where you aren't going to necessarily notice the difference between having both CCDs active versus one of them parked. What we'll do is we'll reach out to our reps at AMD, see if this is something that they've had any information on, or at least can confirm or deny whether or not they're talking with EA about maybe having this work as intended in the future regarding the CPU behavior. But obviously, for a gaming CPU, this is not the way the CPU is intended to behave. It's obviously being affected by the anti-cheat, which is keeping those cores active. And obviously, it's the actual process for the game, as far as I can tell, is being parked mostly, not parked, but prioritied on the frequency die, because you can see the frequency die is more loaded up. Because the top bars is the cache die, the lower bars is the frequency die, and you can see just visually the frequency die is being hit harder. Now, the only other workaround to this, if you're like, I don't give a flying fuck, I want all of my FPS I paid for, is you gotta have to go into either your BIOS or to Ryzen Master and enable game mode, which is gonna disable the other CCD entirely. Now, the problem with that is that means until you go in and put it back into whatever other mode, the standard mode, you have half your CPU turned off at all times. So that is, granted, it's just the flipping of a switch and then time for reboots. That's a pain in the ass. That's a hassle. And the whole point in core parking is that you don't have to do that, but you get the benefit of software doing that. So that's the workaround for now. If you're just like, I don't care, I want all my FPS, because latency in a shooter like this matters. Okay, the more frames you can draw, the more input frames you have as well, which can help you. Now, unless you're playing in competition for money, it's really it's not gonna impact you negatively, other than maybe your ego hit a little bit of going, well, I've got 30 more FPS on the table and I'm not getting it, right? So then you're gonna go through the hassle of disabling it in the BIOS or doing it in the Ryzen Master if you're using Ryzen Master. But I just wanted to kind of make this video because a viewer of mine did send me an email and say, why is nobody talking about this? Now, this isn't just Battlefield. This is pretty much all EA titles at this point, because EA is kind of running Javelin now sort of across the board. And titles that, and I can't confirm this because I don't have the title specifically installed in this system, but based on the behavior I'm seeing here, it makes total sense that this would be the case on these other titles. But the Madden, I think it was Madden 24, as well as Jedi Survivor, are showing the same types of behaviors. So I think we'll just have to keep our ear to the ground and maybe start some conversations and see whether or not AMD is getting involved with EA on maybe making Javelin work the way it's intended to, without impacting user experience for CPUs that are not behaving the way that you've bought them and expect them to behave. All right, guys, there we go. Don't mess with your infinities with Javelin unless you want to take the potential risk of it thinking that you've tampered with it, and tampering, like the way that the anti-cheats bias themselves on decision. This is all algorithm, right? Is if it thinks it's been tampered with, it's going to assume it was tampered with, and it's going to behave and act accordingly. So just don't give it any reason to think that you were cheating, because again, it is irreversible. All right, guys, thanks for watching. If you've experienced this, feel free to comment down below. Do you think you've been banned because you messed with this and somehow forced core parking? What just happened? Oh, yeah, it just went to sleep. All right, guys, I was like, did we just get banned? All right, guys, thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next one.